Yes, so before I go into my number 10, I have some honourable mentions of films that didn't quite make my top 10. So they are A Cure for Wellness, Better Watch Out, The Eyes of My Mother, and The Void. Now, they didn't make my top 10. So if they didn't, fuck knows how good my top 10 must be. Um, yeah, if they didn't make it. Just to warn you, some people will hate me after I go through my list because yeah, you'll see as we go along. Hopefully not, but you never know. So my number 10, 10th best film of the year, is a film that came out in the first half of 2017, and it's A Dark Song by Liam Gavin. For anyone who hasn't seen it, it's mainly about two characters, one of whom is a sort of cynical occultist, and the other is a woman who is paying him to perform a satanic ritual in order so that she can make contact with her dead child. And I really liked this one. Things I liked about it were the score, which I thought was really, really effective. I like the atmosphere that the film kind of evokes. So things don't really happen in inverted commas until kind of the last sort of 15-20 minutes of the film, but getting there, it's actually a really, really cool journey. Incredibly atmospheric, as I said. It's more of a psychological horror film rather than a supernatural horror film, although it's not really a spoiler to say there are supernatural elements right near the end. But it's a very underseen film, I think, and one that I very highly recommend.
Awesome. Yeah, it's an excellent choice. I did enjoy that film. It didn't make my top 10, but I know that you did love that film, and it is well worth a watch. I recommend that too. So I will now do my honourable mentions, the ones that did not make my top 10 but are still awesome. So Ghost Stories, 68 Kill, The Evil Within, Split, and Prevenge, which I've mentioned on previous shows. So with Ghost Stories, we mentioned that in the London Film Festival episode that we did. And on our previous episode where we summarised the year, we've mentioned 68 Kill and The Evil Within, both films that I really loved. And in our first half of 2017 review, we mentioned Split and Prevenge, which I also really loved. But coming in at number 10 is also a film that we mentioned in the previous episode. It is Hounds of Love by director Ben Young. I really loved this film, as we have so mentioned. Mainly I've chosen this for the soundtrack and the visuals and the lead actress, who does an incredible job in this gritty, thrilling crime drama horror, where Vicky Maloney is abducted from a suburban street by a very disturbed couple. It's all about their relationship, and she observes the dynamic between these captors and realises that she needs to drive a wedge between them if she's to get out of this situation, which is horrendous and gritty, very much like Wolf Creek, set in Australia, and very, very creepy. Like I say, it's got this amazing kind of late 70s, early 80s soundtrack with all the decor, and it's just paced incredibly well. I thought this was such an amazing film. I'd highly recommend it.
Well, it's interesting you say that because my number 9 is also Hounds of Love by Ben Young.
Yes.
And really, I don't really have anything further to add really to what you said, because I think you've covered it really well. So incredibly well shot, particularly sort of the opening sort of minute or two, as I mentioned on the last show. There's sort of a slow motion, works really well. The performances are excellent, particularly the couple who abduct the girl, and yeah, great soundtrack. Absolutely. So yeah, I totally 100% agree, which is why I put it at my number 9.
Awesome. So my number 9, following that, is Mother, which we have also talked about on the previous show in our summary for the second part of 2017, directed by Darren Aronofsky, who we have previously discussed. It's one of Greg's favourite directors. Like I say, one of the most intense and stressful films that I've ever watched. Incredibly well acted by Jennifer Lawrence, and everyone else in the cast for this film. So many underlying messages, so much detail, special effects are amazing. I can understand the kind of Marmite effect of reviews where some people hated this, some people loved it, but I think it's it thinks on such a deep level, and it gets you to think on such a deep level of human existence and the way the world is, creativity, fame, the destruction of mankind, starting again, birth, relationships, love, pregnancy, everything like that, that I just thought that this film was amazing. So that's my number 9 of 2017.
Cool, it's a great film. So my number 8 is a controversial film. It's released by A24, and we reviewed it on our post-horror show. It's It Comes at Night by Trey Edward Schultz, who, as I mentioned, previous film he did, which is a film called Creature, I really liked. This one is controversial because, well, is it a horror film? Is it not? IMDb says it is, so that's why I've stuck it in there. This is a very, very well shot film. There's a lot of great tracking shots in this. I love tracking shots. The performances are universally outstanding, particularly Joel Edgerton and the actress who plays his wife, which I believe is Carmen Agojo. Riley Keough is in this, who's a really good actress. And yeah, there's a lot of really great atmosphere in this film. This film is incredibly atmospheric, and I really like how the dream sequences are worked into this, that the son has. And it's just the idea of paranoia, I guess. It's a very, very paranoid film. This would be closer to, I mean, a lot of people have claimed that this is similar to Night of the Living Dead. I would say it's actually more likely to be something like The Crazies, which is another Romero film. It's not necessarily what you see, it's more about how the characters act in the film and kind of what you would do in the same situation. So as I said, incredibly well shot. Again, slightly divisive because, you know, people were expecting more of a horror film than it was, which admittedly I am in that camp too, but you can't undermine how incredibly well made the film is. So It Comes at Night is my number 8.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm quite surprised to hear that in your list. But yeah, I do recommend that film too. It was awesome. So coming in at my number 8, it's another one that we've previously reviewed from the first part of 2017 on that episode. It's also female directed, so one victory for the girls there after how disappointing Bye Bye Man was. This is a great victory for the ladies. It is Raw, which originally was titled Grave. It's a French horror film, also a drama, about a young vegetarian and two sisters and their relationship, and it's basically a vegetarian cannibal movie. The young vegetarian undergoes a carnivorous hazing ritual at vet school and then gets an unbidden taste for meat that begins to grow inside of her. This is such a controversial and, even as the title says, just such a raw, gritty film. There are some amazing scenes in this. There's such a great dynamic between the two sisters. It's also kind of a coming-of-age film of discovering love and sex and relationships and studying and just life itself. Family life, and it's just awesome that they've tackled cannibalism in this kind of way, because I still think it's so shocking for on general release and for people to see at the cinema. If you could see this movie, it was fairly limited, but again, an astounding film, visually spectacular, quite a lot of body horror in it, and very shocking. I really enjoyed it.
Cool. My number 7 is another film directed by a woman, which is The Love Witch by Anna Biller.
Oh, yeah.
So I enjoyed this one. It's not, again, full-on horror. The horror is a lot more kind of underplayed, only really happens in more of the second half of the film. But I really like the style of this one. I appreciate kind of what the director is going for in terms of the films that she's evoking. So it looks very 60s. Samantha Robinson, who plays the lead character, is very, very pretty. And there's lots of shots of her wearing lingerie, which I appreciated, I'm not going to lie. Yeah, it's a very, very well made film. I love kind of how it's deliberately been made in the style of like a 60s film, even in like the performances. and how sort of stiff everyone is. I think that works really well. It's quite funny, it's quite playful, the production design is really awesome. So there isn't really a lot for me to kind of say other than that. Just say it was a really, really good film. Really highly recommend it. So yeah, that's The Love Witch.
Awesome. I do love that film as well. So coming in at my number 7, this slightly bends the rules that Greg has set for himself, so I may get scolded by some. But my number 7 is something that premiered at London Film Festival this year, which is The Killing of a Sacred Deer by Yorgos Lanthimos, who previously directed The Lobster. It's classed as a drama horror mystery. I saw it premiere at the London Film Festival this year and absolutely loved it. It stars Nicole Kidman, Colin Farrell, Alicia Silverstone, and lots of other amazing actors and actresses, including Barry Cohen, who plays Martin, the lead guy. And it's just such an unusual, twisted, dark film, but again, very deep thinking, incredibly well acted, visually amazing, unusual, uncomfortable, and just easily Lanthimos' best film so far. And I did love The Lobster, so this is a fantastic addition to his repertoire. Very much enjoyed it and one to watch for next year, as it's not quite out yet.
Cool. So, yeah, great film. I absolutely agree. My number 6 is a film that I have not mentioned on any previous shows, and technically you could argue came out before 2017, but I don't agree with that. So it was made in 2015, however it's gone through various different kind of issues with it being released. Anyway, finally came out in 2017. It's released by A24 again, I believe, and this is The Black Coat's Daughter, which is by Osgood Perkins, him son of Anthony Perkins, Norman Bates himself. And this is his first film, but it's actually been released second. His only other film is a film which appeared on Netflix last year called I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House, which not a lot of people like, from my understanding. I've not seen it, so I can't really comment. But I really, really, really like this film. It's incredibly atmospheric. It's quite slow, which would probably put a lot of people off. But what I enjoyed about it is, first of all, this is amazing looking. So this has the best use of shadow in any film that I've seen this year. It's just the production design on this and the way that the lighting has been used, and just the overall style of it is so good, so amazingly atmospheric. The story, because we've not talked about it before, is there's two kind of parallel stories involving two kind of young women, one of whom is a senior at a boarding school and the other one who is on the run. And they, as you would expect, intertwine at some point in the story. But I don't want to give too much away because I really knew nothing about this before I watched it, and I was absolutely blown away. So if you like kind of your slow burn films, if you're one of these people who is patient, let's put it that way, then I very highly recommend this film. I'm shocked I had never seen it before, but I have now, and I love it. So only number 6 on my list, but yep, very, very highly recommended.
Yeah, I've not seen that one, so I'll have to watch that soon. Okay, so that's your number 6. Coming in at my number 6, it's the hugely grossing, very popular horror film of this year, Get Out, directed by Jordan Peele. We have spoken about this in the first half of 2017 review. I do love this film. It tackles racial and slavery connotations and undertones. There's a lot of current social topics that get tackled in this film. It's visually astounding. There is some small parts of gore, but mostly it's psychological, and we all know about the hypnotic scenes where the lead actor gets sucked into this other dimension, are visually amazing, and it's just such a clever film with lots of twists. Very unnerving and very disturbing. I find it very difficult to fault this film, and that's why it's number 6. It would have been one of my very favourite films of this year, but it has such stiff competition this year and came out so early in the year, I think that there are other films that have knocked that off the top spot. Earlier in the year, I would have predicted that this would have been even higher than number 6. But overall, a very fantastic film.
Yeah, I remember you saying that it was your favourite film of the year for the first half of the year, so fuck, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, so coming in at number 5 for me is It by Andy Muschietti. So the highest grossing horror film of the year, indeed the highest grossing horror film of all time. Really not that much more to say than what I kind of said on the previous show, but essentially for a mainstream horror film it is really good, even though it does have like an abundance of stuff like jump scares and really naff CGI, which the director has a fondness for. But really, it's the performances of the child actors who are all uniformly excellent. They really, really flesh out these characters because I'm a Stephen King fan. It was actually the first book that I ever read of his, so it's something that has closest to my heart. Bill Skarsgård's performance as Pennywise is also excellent, and yeah, for what is a mainstream horror film, as I said, it's really, really very good, very well made, and yeah, well, I mean, most of you will have seen it already, so it isn't really much of a recommendation, but yeah, it had to be in there somewhere, so yeah, It, number 5.
Excellent. Coming in at my number 5, so one of my favourite films of this year, Greg has already mentioned, it's The Love Witch by Anna Biller. Now, this is the 60s retro-style film, very much harking to Hitchcock, that I wish that I made. I just love this film stylistically, and I love the comedy in it, and I love Samantha Robinson in this. She's fantastic. And like I say, it's just a film that I wish that I made. It's absolutely incredible. In terms of films that are like ideal for me, this about sums me up. It's retro, it's vintage, it's horror, it's dark comedy, and it's female directed and female centric, and I just think it's wonderful. So visually stunning and very underrated and like not really that well widely heard of. I would recommend this to anybody. Please, please, please watch this film.
Agree. My number 4 is a film that Ria has already mentioned, which is Raw. It's by Julia Ducournau. Just to reiterate what Ria's pretty much said already, so I really like the feel of this film. It's a very vibrant and youthful sort of film. I like the musical choices in the film. I like how it's a story that's been told before, but this is told in a slightly different way because it's cannibals now, as opposed to like Ginger Snaps, which I think I mentioned before, is kind of almost similar to this, where it's someone awakening. There's some great individual scenes in this. Like, for example, there is a scene where, well, it's a scene where the sisters have a fight. That's pretty intense, and yeah, just it's just a very, very well made film. And yeah, that's pretty. I don't really have much more to say than that, other than I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Yeah, heavily agree with that. So coming in at my number 4, I could not resist, although most people have not seen this as it's not out until next year, but I saw it premiere at the London Film Festival. It's the new Del Toro film, The Shape of Water, which is absolutely astounding. Easily his best film yet. It's set in the 1960s. It's a period film with many kind of nods to the 1950s, to it has a very sort of Amelie feel to this film. It has excellent comedy. It has a sort of creature, much like the creature from the Black Lagoon, kind of classic horror sort of vibes to it. It's very sort of fantasy-like, and there's kind of a sort of Beauty and the Beast style relationship going on, and a romance. And it's just a stunning film. I heavily recommend this. It really, really blew me away, and I can't wait for people to start watching this next year because I think it's just going to be such big news. So yeah, The Shape of Water is my number 4, so I still have 3 more to go above that, and I absolutely love this film.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing it when it comes out next year. Absolutely. So my number three is another film that Ria has already mentioned. It's Mother by Darren Aronofsky, who, as she said, is one of my favourite directors. The most controversial film of the year. Some people absolutely love it, which I do. Some people absolutely hate it. If you do, it's your loss, motherfuckers. So I really like the style of it. I love the intensity of it. I love that it's because you don't get films like this really nowadays because everything is kind of safe because you don't want to push certain buttons, whereas this does really get very intense, particularly in like the last sort of 30 minutes. It gets unbearably tense, which harkens back, as I said, to like Requiem for a Dream, which is my favourite Aronofsky film. So yeah, the performances are universally great. Particularly Jennifer Lawrence is very good, considering she goes through a lot of shit in this film. And just the way it's done, there's certain scenes in this film where, because it's all in one building, you kind of just wonder how they did certain things, which if you watch the film will make sense. I don't really want to spoil it too much. But yeah, this is an incredibly good film. It was a very intense experience. Really highly recommend it for everyone, even if you hate it and you haven't seen it yet, just because you don't really get films like this very often. And I'm just very curious to see what Aronofsky does next. Hopefully not anything like Noah again, because that film sucked. So yeah, so that's my number three, is Mother.
Yeah, I concur. Excellent choice for number three there. Coming in at my number three, it's the most grossing horror film of all time. It's It, which Greg has already mentioned. It's just a classic for me, and I was so excited for this remake and look forward to it for so long. There's so much build up, and I loved the trailers when that was coming out, and I think some of these scenes in these films, particularly the drain scene at the beginning and some wide shots of the exterior of the house and some of the scenes inside the house and everything, just absolutely stunning, and some amazing jump scares that did actually make me jump out of my skin. I just thought that this was everything that I wanted it to be. It also it was inclusive of so many film fans, including non-horror fans, casual horror fans, or die-hard fans of 80s horror that we also love, and it just brought so much to the Stephen King original story, but without detracting too much attention from the original. It was different, but it still brought a lot of like modern value with the special effects and, you know, new things that they brought to this film. And I just thought I couldn't really fault it. It's absolutely amazing.
Cool. So there's a theme developing here, because my number two is another film that Ria mentioned earlier, which is The Killing of a Sacred Deer by Yorgos Lanthimos, my second favourite horror film of 2017. So big fan of Lanthimos's previous films, particularly Dogtooth, which I think is an amazing film. I don't think this is quite as good as Dogtooth, but it's still very good. It's his best English language film to date, and I just love the way that this has been made. I love the way that it's shot. I love how he puts characters in different parts of the frame to indicate that there's tension between them. The film is really unsettling. It's really uncomfortable. The relationship between Colin Farrell's character and Martin is very unnerving and uncomfortable. And it's one of these films, you know, things are going to go wrong. And they do, but maybe not quite in the way that you would expect. And I just love Lanthimos' style. This has been compared to Kubrick, as I mentioned on the London Film Festival show, which is a very apt comparison. The use of music, the camera movements. There's a shot of Nicole Kidman and one of the children sort of on an escalator filming from above, which is absolutely amazing. It's a breathless sort of shot. And yeah, it's just filmmaking par excellence. So good that there was only really one film that I thought was better than this all year. It's so good. If you've not seen it already, because it's not out on DVD yet, please definitely check it out, because it's amazing.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, I forgot that it had actually been released at the cinema after its original premiere, but we are just waiting for it to come out on DVD release now. So if you didn't catch it at the cinema, as Greg says, you must see this film. It's amazing. So, not surprised that it's your second favourite film of the year, actually. Greg, I didn't think it would be quite high up. So, number 2 for me is a film by one of my favourite directors, S. Craig Zahler, Brawl in Cell Block 99, which is not strictly listed as a horror, but it's a very violent and gory film. It's actually a crime drama, but I do feel that it fits into horror, and Zahler's last film, Bone Tomahawk, was also in this sort of mixed category, which did involve elements of gore, violence, and horror. So I do feel comfortable putting that into the horror genre. It also brings back Vince Vaughn in one of his greatest roles of all time. He's absolutely incredible in this film. Much like Bone Tomahawk, it's very much slow build, but then absolute chaos then breaks out. And it's just so interesting, so brutal, much like Bone Tomahawk was. And I just absolutely love this film. I thought it was just incredible. This guy is very quickly becoming my very, very favourite director. I can't wait to see what he does next. So yeah, you must check out this film if you liked his previous work, and if you like general prison cell block, sort of escape type films. But you really have to see this to know what this is about, because it's not just your average cell block brawl. It's amazing.
Well, that brings us to our number 1 films of 2017, which my number 1, not to drag this out too long, it was Empire's Film of the Year. It was Sight and Sound's Film of the Year. It's won various awards already, and we're not even really in award season yet. It has been nominated for the Golden Globe for Best Film in Comedy/Musical, which, so I've probably already given away what it is. And to complete the set, as the previous 3 films have been, Ria has indeed already mentioned it, it's Get Out by Jordan Peele. Really, there isn't really a lot to say about this, because it's the most important film of the year, I would say. It's it made a lot of money. It didn't make as much as It, for example, but it's going to have a lot more of a wider impact over time, I think. It's just a really, really good film. It's a film that we haven't really seen before. It's a film about racism that's dealing with this liberal kind of passive racism, and it's also a film kind of about slavery as well, although not in an obvious way, like kind of 12 Years a Slave. And it's just incredibly well made, very well acted, very well shot. There isn't really a whole lot more I can really say about it. If you haven't seen it already, please watch it. It was my film of the year. It's Get Out.
Awesome, good choice. So then that brings us to my number 1 film of the year, which is a slightly unconventional choice. We mentioned it in the post-horror episode that we did for the podcast, and it is David Lowery's A Ghost Story. Now, I absolutely loved this film. It's by no means violent, gory, or terrifying, but it's a very reflective, existential film, which has been a running theme for 2017, existential horror, even with Greg's number 1 choice of Get Out, and Mother, and other films that we've mentioned previously. It's a fantasy, drama, romance with a structure and elements of horror to it, and I just absolutely love this. I think David Lowery as a director is one to watch. He's not really done anything like this before. He directed Pete's Dragon before, and Ain't Them Bodies Saints. This film, A Ghost Story, highlights Casey Affleck and Rooney Mara, and their on-screen relationship incredibly well. It's a very unconventional film. It's a very brave film. It's a real feel-good film, but a deep thinker again, as I say, and it's visually stunning and just so different. I've never seen anything like it before. You can't really get a picture of what this film is like without actually watching it all, because there's nothing really to compare it to be honest. Essentially, it's a haunting film, a haunted house film, but really it's not, and it's difficult to believe that this film as a concept would work, and it is very much a concept film. And I think David Lowery in the Q&A went where me and Greg went to see this film and he was there. He didn't quite believe this film was going to work either, but I do think it works very well, and it was definitely my favourite film of this year. Absolutely loved it. Please see this film. It's amazing.